Hi everyone. So I hope you had a really restful spring break. I sure did. But tomorrow in class, or you might be watching this morning, for class today, I want to kind of go over what we were working on before exams. We were learning how to factor by grouping. Now I want to remind you just of a couple things because I'm going to hit the ground running tomorrow. When we factor by grouping, we had to be good at recognizing that sometimes a greatest common factor could be an expression. So you can see that both terms, this has two terms. I know it's kind of funny looking, but this is a term and this is a term of a polynomial. So m plus 4n is a greatest common factor to both terms. So I can pull that out to the front. If I do that, if I pull that out to the front, I'll be left with m and minus. Now, we would have to put a placeholder here of 1. So think about that. If I were to distribute that, I would end up right back here. Like if I were to try and distribute m plus 4 times m and then m plus 4 times negative 1, this is what I'd end up with. All right, well, how did we factor by grouping? Well, we recognized, first of all, that we would be factoring by grouping because there were 4 terms. Now, remember that checklist we had. We went through 1 term, 2 terms, 3 terms, GCFs. Well, now we've got 4 terms, so we know we're going to try to factor by grouping, which means we're going to group together each part. And we're going to look at them like their own expressions. And we look for the greatest common factor between the terms. So between x cubed and x squared, our greatest common factor, our GCF, would be x squared. We pull that out, and to find out what we'd be left with, we divide it to each of the terms. So we would get x plus 1. Then we go to the next set of grouping group. So we pull out a 5. Now remember when we pull it out, I said you want to put a sign in front of it. So if it's positive, you're going to put a plus sign. If it's negative, you're going to put a minus sign. And you'd also be left with x plus 1. One of the really important things is if these are not the same, you did not group it properly, so you've done something wrong. So that's the good news. Now that x plus 1 is our greatest common factor. We pull it out to the front. I tend to put it in parentheses when I do that. And what would we be left with? Well, we'd be left with x squared plus 5. And we factored. All right, let's try another one. X cubed, okay, this should be y cubed. So y cubed minus 14y squared plus y minus 14. This one was a little bit more challenging. Again, we are going to group together. I always check the first 2 and the second 2, but you can move them around if you need to. And we're going to take out a y squared because that's the greatest common factor in the first set. That leaves me with y minus 14. Well, my other term is y minus 14. So this was a situation where you had to factor out a positive 1. So I have to pull something out. But if they're exactly the same, that means I'm going to pull out a positive 1. And if I do that, you can see that now I have a y minus 14. Now that y minus 14 has become the GCF, so I pull it out to the front. I'm going to put it in parentheses, and I'd be left with y squared plus 1. And then I've factored by grouping. All right, let's try another one. Last one today. I see it's 4 terms, so I'm going to factor by grouping. I'm going to pull out a GCF of the first set of terms, which is m squared. I'm left with m minus 6. That helps me a lot. I go to the second one. I'm looking for an m minus 6, and I can see that the GCF, the greatest common factor of 2 and 12, is 2, which does leave me with m minus 6. I verify that these are exactly the same, which they are, so I can factor out that m minus 6, and I'll be left with m squared plus 2. All right, so that's how you factor by grouping. Now, we did a bunch of them in class, and you guys are doing really well with them, but I want to remind you of our checklist. So now, up to this point, you're going to have to feel comfortable with all of this, and if you don't, it's time to get in for extra help. All right, so we go through a process, our checklist, our factoring checklist. Look, have we taken out a GCF, if there is one? Greatest common factor, GCF in it. If it's 2 terms, you look for the special form. You look for dots, the difference of 2 squares, x squared minus 25, because that will factor to x plus 5, x minus 5. Remember, difference means they're different. If it's 3 terms, before you go to trinomial factoring, you're going to look for PSTs, for perfect square trinomials. If it's not a PST, you've got trinomial factoring. And now, if it's 4 terms, you're going to factor by grouping. All of these things we're going to have to be good at, because today in class, when you come in, we're going to practice a little bit of each, and then we're going to move on to solving quadratic equations by using these techniques, okay? All right, guys, have a great day. See you later.